Asia is home to the Himalayas, the highest mountain range on Earth. Covering a distance of 2,700 kilometers, the Himalayas overlooks the landscape of 6 countries: India, Nepal, Pakistan, China, Bhutan, and Tibet. For thousands of years, the peoples of these regions have considered the Himalayas to be a manifestation of divinity. Towering above all else on Earth, the Himalayas reach out to touch the heavens. Ancient cultures speak of the Himalayas as the king of mountains, the destroyer of sins, God's embrace of the world, the abode of gods, and the expanse of the 2 arms of the great being. Kalidas, a famous Indian poet, has written, "The Himalayas are a great god, a great spiritual presence, stretching from the west to the eastern sea, like a measuring rod to gauge the world's greatness." Indeed, the snow-clad peaks of the Himalayas have been an inspiration for saints, sages, and adventurers throughout the ages. It is easy to get carried away with the superlative when describing the Himalayas. After all, these are some of the most beautiful mountains in the world, such as Dholagiri, Makalu, Annapurna, Manaslu, and the highest mountain in the world, Sagarmatha or Everest. The Himalayas were formed from the Earth's crust nearly 100 million years ago, when seismic movements of the Earth's tectonic plates split apart large sections of the world's landmass. What we now know as India began to move towards Asia and slid under the Asian shelf, capturing the Tethys Sea in between, pushing up both sea and rock to form the Himalayas. India continues to push underneath Asia, and thus the Himalayas have risen about 2,000 meters in the past 20,000 years and continue to rise at the rate of 10 centimeters every year. In modern times, Akai Kawaguchi, a Japanese Buddhist monk, became the first outsider to enter the heartlands of the Himalayas in 1899. At that time, Nepal and Tibet were known as forbidden kingdoms and were off limits to foreigners. Kawaguchi disguised himself as a Chinese doctor and travelled in the forbidden kingdoms for 3 years. Later, Kawaguchi's diary became the first detailed description of the forbidden kingdoms for the outside world. During the period of British colonial rule, Nepal opened its doors to foreigners, whereas Tibet maintained its closed-door policy until 1949, when the Chinese Liberation Army invaded Tibet. Tibet, to this day, remains a politically sensitive region and is difficult to access by foreigners. We begin our Himalayan pilgrimage in Kathmandu, the capital city of Nepal, where we will remain for a few days before going on to Pokhara, then Jomsom, and at last to our final destination, the sacred shrine of Muktinath. Kathmandu is situated in a valley that was once a great lake. According to Nepali legend, Lord Vishnu evaporated the lake during the play of the gods. Today, Kathmandu is home to more than 500,000 Nepalese and Tibetans. In this remote region of the world, many places and customs remain unchanged since the Middle Ages, when the Malla dynasty established Kathmandu as their capital. In modern times, Nepal has been ruled by the Shah dynasty, that suffered a severe setback in 2001 when Crown Prince Dipendra massacred all the members of the immediate royal family. Today, King Gyanendra V. Vikram Shah, the brother of the previous king, rules the last Hindu kingdom on earth. A taste of old Nepal can easily be found every day at Durbar Square, in front of the old royal palace known as Hanuman Doka. Here, people gather every morning to visit their favourite temple and pay homage to the gods by offering a flower or a butter lamp. Numerous temples and shrines surround the great square, such as the Maju Deval, the temple of Lord Shiva, the Gopal Mandir, the temple of Lord Krishna, the Nasal Chowk Mandir, the temple of Lord Vishnu, and the Kumari Bahal, the temple of the Virgin Goddess. At the Kumari Bahal, 2 white stone lions guard the temple doorway. The Virgin Goddess, who lives within, is considered an incarnation of Durga, the female principle of material nature. It is customary that the young goddess be worshipped daily until she reaches maturity, at which time she is replaced by another young virgin. This custom has been prevalent in Nepal since 1768. Nearby, at the temple of Lord Vishnu, stands a stone statue of Garuda, the king of birds, with his hands folded in prayer. At one of the entrance roads to Durbar Square is the great bell, which when rung is believed to drive away evil spirits as it calls the devout to worship. In the early morning, saintly beggars converge around the popular shrines in hopes of receiving alms or a handout from a pilgrim. Pious Hindus believe that by giving in charity to these holy men, one will achieve greater prosperity in the next life. The doctrine of reincarnation plays a significant role in the Hindu belief system. In almost every circumstance, the Hindus perform their religious duties in order to be elevated to a higher status in the next life. It is believed that after many lifetimes, a pious Hindu may be liberated from the cycle of repeated birth and death. The worship of Hindu gods prevails around Durbar Square, where even some Buddhist deities have been absorbed into the Hindu pantheon. Here, the Buddhist deity Mahakala has been converted to become Kala Bhairava, the wrathful manifestation of Shiva. And in another place, the same Mahakala has been transformed into Sveta Bhairava, the unauthorized Nepali god of beer. Some commentators have said that Hinduism is the world's most accommodating religion. This may very well be true. However, the Orthodox Hindus believe that the authorized deity is the form of the Supreme who manifests to accept service from the worshipper. In such worship, no concoction or adulteration is allowed. Offering, or the act of giving to the deity and pleasing the deity, is an intricate part of the Orthodox way of worship. Deities are worshipped by offering butter lamps, fruits, flowers, and incense. The deity is often bathed in opulent substances like honey, scented oils, yogurt, and milk. The deity is then taken in a grand procession, accompanied by music, singing, and dancing. The Orthodox Hindus believe that all these systems of worship are pleasing to the Supreme and also purifying to the self. Chanting of sacred mantras and the study of Sanskrit literatures like the Vedas, Puranas, Mahabharata, and the Bhagavad Gita are also important practices for the devout Hindu. It is said that it takes many years or even lifetimes to learn Sanskrit proficiently. But with a little determination, any worshipper can learn a few appropriate mantras and chant them during worship and meditation. Commercial vendors also gather at Durbar Square and throughout the city to sell their wares to eager tourists who are always looking for a good bargain. Wooden masks are a popular item, as are traditional rice bowls and Tibetan prayer wheels. But by far, the most time-honoured souvenir of Nepal is the world-renowned kukri, or the Gurkha knife. The kukri is legendary, so much so that it has become synonymous with the soul of the Nepalese. This knife has been part of Nepali life for centuries. It is used in some religious rituals when animals like buffaloes are sacrificed. It has been used in capital punishment to behead criminals, and it is used in times of war. In World War I and World War II, the Nepalese Gurkhas won important victories in North Africa, Persia, Italy, Burma, Malaya and Indonesia, where the enemy mortally feared the Gurkhas for their deadly skill with the kukri. A popular destination for foreign visitors in Kathmandu is the Pashupatinath temple, dedicated to Lord Shiva. Here, foreigners are allowed to enter the temple and observe the rituals of worship, but more interesting to most visitors are the daily cremations that take place within the temple grounds. Not a day in the year passes without seeing at least 3 or 4 cremations at Pashupatinath. According to the Hindu faith, the present life on earth is temporary, and after death, the soul moves on to the next life. This repeated cycle of birth and death is called samsara, the blazing fire of material existence. The Vedic scripture, Bhagavad Gita, says that although life in this body is temporary, the soul is eternal. One's actions in this life will determine the state of being that one achieves in the next life. Due to attachments to the temporary phenomena of the material world, such as wealth, fame, beauty, knowledge, strength, and family members, the soul becomes bewildered at the time of death, and thus has difficulty transmigrating to the next life. It is the belief of Hindus that cremation of the body after death will help to purify the departed soul from attachments to this material world, thus making it easier for the soul to transmigrate to the next birth. Indeed, even witnessing a cremation can awaken one's awareness of the temporary nature of life in this world. Although Nepal is predominantly populated by Hindus, one could easily be misled to think that Nepal was a Buddhist kingdom. Although there are only 12,000 Tibetan Buddhists living in and around Kathmandu, they have an exceptionally strong presence in the public eye. Since ancient times, Tibetans have lived in Nepal as merchants, but in modern times they have come to Nepal as refugees. For many years, Tibet enjoyed complete religious and political autonomy from the rest of the world. But all that began to change in 1949, and Tibetan traditions fell on the brink of destruction. At that time, the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, who since his childhood was designated as Tibet's religious and political leader, ruled Tibet. Under the order of Chairman Mao Zedong, Tibet soon became home to tens of thousands of invading Chinese soldiers. The People's Liberation Army had come to Tibet to enforce communism and eliminate religious tradition. In 1951, the Dalai Lama headed a delegation to Beijing to hold talks with Chairman Mao in hopes of a peaceful solution to the problem. The delegation, however, faced threats of increased military action and returned to Tibet dissatisfied. During the Dalai Lama's meeting with Chairman Mao, Mao stated unequivocally that religion was poison. In Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, oppression under the Chinese led to public demonstrations that were responded to with brutal military action. In those demonstrations, thousands of Tibetans were imprisoned and hundreds lost their lives. The Chinese soon defeated the resistance of a small Tibetan army of only 5,000 soldiers, and in 1959 the Dalai Lama was forced into exile in India, followed by an unprecedented exodus of 100,000 refugees. In the absence of the Dalai Lama, the Chinese launched an assault of heavy bombardment on the royal palace and a systematic destruction of more than 4,500 monasteries across the country. In these attacks, thousands of innocent monks and nuns were humiliated, brutalized, and murdered. In India, the Dalai Lama formed his movement for the freedom of Tibet and has worked diligently for the cause. In 1989, the Dalai Lama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts, but to this day, Tibet remains subjugated by China. At present, Tibetan refugees enjoy freedom of religion in Nepal and in India, where they have revived some old places of worship and established many new monasteries. Although a minority religion in the Western world, the teachings of Buddha have gained immense popularity, predominantly due to the emphasis on the principle of non-violence. Buddhism had its beginning in the 6th century BC, with the birth of Gautam Buddha in Lumbini, Nepal. Buddha was born in a royal family, but renounced his royalty and pursued the path of liberation. After many years of meditation, the Buddha achieved enlightenment and began preaching his sermons extolling the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering, suffering has a cause, suffering can be surpassed, and there is a method by which one can attain freedom from suffering. These Four Noble Truths have remained the foundation of the Buddha's teachings for the past 26 centuries. The Tibetans, however, prior to their conversion to Buddhism in the 8th century AD, were shamans and were practiced in the black arts of worshipping demons, ghosts, and other supernatural beings. The Indian mystic yogi Padmasambhava came to Tibet and introduced a mix of Buddhism and Tantra, the system of esoteric magical rituals. Thus, shamanism, Buddhism, and Tantra combined to become Tibetan Buddhism. A distinct difference between Tibetan Buddhism and other forms of Buddhism found in the world today is that a Tibetan Buddhist believes that one should end not only one's own suffering, but also the suffering of all other beings, to each of whom he owes a karmic debt. The understanding is that one person's liberation is incomplete until all other beings have been liberated. To assist in Buddhist meditations, human remains, such as ornamented skulls, are sometimes used as a reminder of the temporary nature of material life. These skulls are a preferred item and are sometimes used by the monks as cereal bowls or teacups. When human relics are not available, the use of monkey skulls is also acceptable, especially in tantric ceremonies. All these articles are to remind the Buddhist that death is certain. Indeed, these items have become so popular that they may now easily be purchased through the internet. In the words of the 14th Dalai Lama, Tibet's supreme religious leader, the Buddhists do not believe in a supreme being or a creator, and say that they are not a spiritual being. They do not believe in the existence of the soul or eternal life. A strong factor, however, in the success of Tibetan Buddhism is the commitment of their monks and nuns. When one becomes a monk or a nun from the Tibetan community, their commitment is for life. And it is not uncommon to see monks and nuns ordained during early childhood. It is estimated that about 20% of the Tibetan population in exile becomes either monks or nuns. The lifestyle of the monks is simple. They are given a secular and religious education. They rise early every morning and perform the rituals, studies and meditations required for their particular status. After a period of 30 or more years, it is possible for a monk of outstanding qualifications to be promoted to the highest rank of a lama. It is also not uncommon these days to see people of Western origin taking up Tibetan Buddhism and dedicating their lives to the teachings of Buddha. Indeed, Buddhism is one of the fastest growing religions in the world today. After a very interesting and enlightened stay in Kathmandu, we take a 6-hour bus ride to Pokhara. Pokhara is a favourite destination for trekkers before beginning their journey into the Annapurnas. The town is situated on the banks of Lake Phewa Tal, with the Annapurna range of the Himalayas as a picturesque backdrop. Towering 6,997 metres above the serenity of Lake Phewa Tal stands Mount Machapuchiri, said to be the abode of the gods Vishnu and Shiva. The sacredness of Machapuchiri has made it off-limits to mountain climbers. The government of Nepal has declared Machapuchiri a hallowed sanctuary, and thus it is one of the few places in the world reserved for the gods. Today's Pokhara is no more the laid-back Pokhara of old. It is now a bustling little town filled with shops, restaurants, taxis, cinemas and hotel resorts. The local bazaar is an ideal place to pick up an ornate rice bowl or a prayer wheel before heading out on our trek. It is also not a bad idea to browse the bazaar for any remaining equipment that we might need, such as a Gore-Tex jacket or a down sleeping bag. Pokhara also presents a great opportunity to check out the tanka shops and see how these amazingly detailed paintings are created. Tankas vary in size from 40 centimeters square to enormous tankas that cover entire walls and take several years to complete. The traditional tanka artist receives training in the family tradition or from a monastery and uses only organic paints in the making. These tankas are sometimes used as meditation prompts and usually depict the great Buddha or the lives of sages in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Outside the tanka shop, we caught the act of the local snake charmers. Unexpectedly, one of our cameramen fell sway to the hypnotic music of the snake charmer's flute and was lured into their midst. Fortunately, after a few cups of herbal tea and a day's rest, our cameraman was back to normal. When the cloud cover of Pokhara is too dense, the scenic backdrop of the Himalayas cannot be seen. This, however, gives us a good reason to fly above the clouds in an ultralight aircraft to get a bird's eye view of the snow-capped peaks.
Ready.
Nikolai, our Russian pilot, takes us through the clouds to 4,000 meters, where the views in Machu Picchu are absolutely breathtaking. Turbulent air currents, however, prohibit us from getting too close to Machu Picchu. Nikolai warns us that any closer to the mountain and we could get caught in an air pocket that would hurl us down to our deaths, and so we keep a safe distance. On the return flight, we get our first glimpse of the Kali Gandaki, the most sacred river in Nepal, that flows from Tibet to India, where it joins the river Ganges. And before making our landing, we circled the Buddhist peace stupa that was built in modern times by the Japanese as a gesture of world peace. Back at Ground Zero, things are not as peaceful as they look from the sky. Maoist rebels have periodically been disrupting the tranquility of Nepal for the past decade, and today, Maoist supporters were out in the streets in a public demonstration protesting the war in Iraq. Shouts of Murdabad, Murdabad, death to America fill the air, and placards calling President Bush the enemy of humanity clearly shows the Maoist bitterness towards Uncle Sam. We are told that Maoist rebels have been known to abduct foreign trekkers, and this prompts us to fly to Jomsom rather than to take the normal 5-day trekking route that goes through some Maoist-controlled villages. At Jomsom, we are greeted by the vast expanse of the Gandaki Gorge. Towering on all sides are the great Himalayas. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that of immovable objects, he is the Himalayas. In front of us stands Nilgiri, the blue mountain of the Annapurnas at 8,091 meters. To our right towers Dholagiri at 8,167 meters. Between these two great edifices of nature flows the Kali Gandaki River, thus making the Gandaki Gorge the deepest river valley in the world. Once a trade route from Tibet to India, the gorge is now one of the most popular trekking trails in the Himalayas. This is the same route to Tibet that was taken by the Japanese Buddhist monk Eikai Kawaguchi in 1899. Other than the airport and a few hotels in the village, little has changed in Jomsom since the time of Kawaguchi. Life in the villages along the Gandaki is simple and austere. The people here are known as Takalis and are mostly yak herders and simple farmers. Being just below the tree line at 2,713 meters, there is little vegetation here, except for a few sparse wheat fields and apple orchards. The Takalis consider the high mountain peaks that tower above the Gandaki to be the abode of the gods, and it was not until modern times that any human being ventured to the summits of these mountains. A little time spent with the Takalis, and one quickly realizes the contrast of attitudes between that of a pilgrim and that of an adventurer. The adventurer sees the awesome manifestations of nature as something to be conquered, whereas a pilgrim sees them as a manifestation of the Supreme, something to be revered. One might reconsider man's desire to exploit nature when one takes into account the number of deaths that occur each year among those who attempt to conquer the abode of the gods. The Himalayas have the world's highest mortality rate amongst mountain climbers. For instance, 183 climbers have attempted to conquer Annapurna, and 53 have died in the process. Indeed, man without spiritual vision is often driven to his death like a moth to the flame. There is indeed an unparalleled beauty to behold for those who are content to view the abodes of the gods from a little distance and below, and without a doubt it is all the safer. A marked absence of trekkers and pilgrims this year at Jomsom is due to Maoist activities in the area, but there seems to be little danger for us, and with Muktinath, our final destination, only 2 days trek away, we are anxious to get started.
Hard aspect of getting down.
Our guide, Sherpa Bahadur, suggests that we take the long way round to Muktinath by pony, and he assures us that the views of Nilgiri will be worth the extra endeavour. Nilgiri isn't the highest mountain in the Himalayas, but it certainly is one of the most beautiful. The glacier face catches the rays of the rising sun, and in the afternoon, the mountain casts a long shadow across the Gandaki Gorge. In this region, weather can change dramatically within minutes, and this can be a problem for anyone caught on the mountain without proper preparation. Even with proper preparation, being caught in a high mountain storm can result in loss of life. In the Everest disaster of 1996, a severe storm slammed into Everest without warning, leaving 7 climbers dead. High winds, chilling rain and occasional snow can all be part of a normal day when you're trekking along the mountain slopes. Our small party of pilgrims was prepared for some bad weather, but we were not prepared for being detained by Maoist rebels. This came as a sudden shock. In a small village just 2 hours from Jomsom, we were stopped and insisted at gunpoint to dismount and give a donation to the Maoist cause. Possibly owing to the fact that most of the people in our pilgrims' party were only kids, the Maoist rebels were quite friendly to us. Taking this opportunity, we convinced them that exposure would be good for their cause and they agreed to give us an interview with their local leader.
Namaskar.
Yes, nice to meet you.
Yeah, बैठिए.
Pleasure to meet you, sir. Thank you.
मैं इस गांव का मोस्ट लीडर हूं नेपाल में. पूरा संसार को ये बताना चाहिए, मोस्ट फ्रीडम फाइटर्स को सोशलिस्ट डेमोक्रेसी चाहिए. और ये नेपाल में भ्रष्ट राज सरकार चला रहा है, इससे लोगों को बहुत तकलीफ हो रहा है. हम इस गवर्नमेंट को बदलना चाहिए और हम बे लोगों को नहीं मानना चाहता है, लेकिन हमारा लड़ाई चलती रहेगी. और दुर्दैव है यूएसए सरकार और सीआईए नेपाल राज को सपोर्ट कर रहा है. हम इस सपोर्ट को बंद करना चाहिए और संसार को ये जानना चाहिए, मोइस्ट रेवोल्यूशन को सपोर्ट करना चाहिए पूरा लोग. धन्यवाद. मोइस्ट रेवोल्यूशन
जिंदाबाद,
मोइस्ट रेवोल्यूशन
जिंदाबाद,
मोइस्ट रेवोल्यूशन
जिंदाबाद, जिंदाबाद,
मोइस्ट रेवोल्यूशन
जिंदाबाद, जिंदाबाद.
मोइस्ट.
After a namaste, a friendly talk, and getting a receipt for our $20 donation, 1 hour later, we are on our way again. The way to Muktinath takes us along the base of the Nilgiri and then along the banks of the Gandaki River. The views of the mountain peaks and Gandaki Gorge along the way are indeed awe-inspiring. Along the way, we passed many old temple ruins and stone slabs with prayers etched on them. At some distance, we can see mountain caves that were previously hermitages but are now eroded away by the elements. It is of little wonder that this is considered a sacred place. The natural beauty of this region alone heralds the presence of divinity in all directions. Thus, one cannot help but to remember the Supreme. Muktinath is situated just below the Torlangla Pass at 3,750 meters. The temple of Vishnu and his consorts Sri Devi and Bhudevi, located in Muktinath, makes this the highest place of Vishnu worship in the world. The ancient Sanskrit literatures state that the lotus feet of Vishnu are above all, like the sun is above our head. Great saintly persons always see the lotus feet of Vishnu, recognizing him as the highest truth. Muktinath is sacred to Hindus and Buddhists alike. For the Hindus, Muktinath is important because of the presence of the self-manifested deity of Lord Vishnu found in the temple. And for the Buddhists, Muktinath is sacred because it was there that the mystic yogi Padmasambhava performed penance and meditation. Upon arriving at Muktinath, we expected to find Hindu monks managing the temple, but we were pleasantly surprised to see that Buddhist nuns were performing all the worship of the Vishnu deity. This is certainly something very much out of the ordinary, in that these two religions have come together and harmonized at Muktinath. The Buddhists worship Vishnu at Muktinath as the Adi Buddha, or the original Buddha. It is a little known fact that Buddha was actually an incarnation of Vishnu who appeared in the world to preach non-violence. Indeed, even the deity of Vishnu at Muktinath has a striking resemblance to Lord Buddha. The worship of Vishnu at Muktinath has been going on since hoary antiquity. The present temple, however, was constructed by Queen Suvarnaprabha in 1815. We found the temple to be very clean and well managed, but cameras were not allowed inside. Behind the main temple is a stream called Chumik that is divided into 108 outlets, each pouring forth from the mouth of a cow. It is said that the water of this stream has the power to cleanse one's sins. Pilgrims sprinkle a few drops of these sacred waters on their heads to assure their salvation. A short distance from the main temple is the unimposing shrine of Jwalamayi, the goddess of fire. In this humble shrine burns a small flame that comes from the depths of the earth. The flame burns on top of a pool of water that represents the union of opposite elements. Some legends say that the god Brahma made an offering here to Vishnu by setting the water on fire thousands of years ago. The flame has been continually burning since that time and reflects within the pilgrim the eternal nature of consciousness. Consciousness, like the immortal flame at Muktinath, is very small but lives forever.